You know, when you think of legendary heists, there are few that just stand out. And the Great Train Robbery of 1963, well, that's right at the top of the list. It was bold, it was brilliant, and for a little while, it was the perfect crime. It's famous not just for the insane amount of money, but for the sheer audacity of it all. So let's dive in and unpack how they pulled this thing off, and, more importantly, how it all came crashing down.
It sounds like a riddle, doesn't it? How do you stop a massive, speeding train with something as simple as a glove and a battery? But that's not a joke. That's exactly what they did. This wasn't some high-tech Mission Impossible-style operation. It was all about low-tech genius. And this one simple question, it's the key to the entire story. Okay, so let's set the scene. Our story kicks off in the middle of the night, on a quiet, lonely stretch of railroad track, where something was about to happen that, well, just shouldn't have been possible.
So it's August 8th, 1963. The driver, Jack Mills, is just doing his job, piloting this Royal Mail train through the darkness. And then he sees it, a red light. Now you have to understand, this was weird. For this particular train, on this particular line, that signal was never red. He slams on the brakes, the train grinds to a halt in the middle of nowhere, and he has no idea he's just driven straight into a perfectly laid trap.
But hold on. How did a gang of robbers even know how to stop a train at that exact spot? To get that, we've got to rewind a bit and look at the master plan. Because this whole thing was only possible thanks to two little pieces of inside information and one very ambitious criminal mastermind.
The entire operation, the whole shebang, it all came down to this guy, a real shadowy figure, a senior security officer working inside the Royal Mail. To this day, nobody knows who he was. He was the one who fed the mastermind, Bruce Reynolds, the critical info that turned this crazy idea into a very real, multi-million-pound plan. And this was the first bombshell tip. See, normally the carriage with all the cash, they called it the HVP, was wired with alarms. But on this specific night, the main one was out for repairs. They were using a backup, carriage M3024M, and the inside man knew its biggest secret. Absolutely no alarms. It was a sitting duck.
As if a carriage with no alarms wasn't good enough, the timing made it the score of a lifetime. The second tip was pure gold. Because of a recent bank holiday weekend, the banks had shipped a ton of extra cash, so the train wasn't just carrying its usual load, it was carrying a jackpot. We're talking almost 10 times the normal amount. I mean, just look at this comparison. On any other night, this would have been a huge risk for maybe a few £100,000. But on this night, with a massive pile of cash and zero alarms, it was a perfect storm, an opportunity that was just too good for them to ever pass up. So the plan was solid, the prize was massive, the gang moved into position. Now we get to the main event, the heist itself.
The timing on this was just incredible. At exactly 3 a.m., they rigged the signal with that glove and battery. 3 minutes later, the train stops. In about 12 minutes, they've uncoupled the carriages they want and have already moved them a kilometer down the track. And by 3:40 a.m., poof, they're gone. It was fast, it was ruthless, and it was perfectly choreographed. And the operation on the ground, it was this amazing mix of brains and brawn. Reynolds brought two different gangs together for the job. They swarmed the train, cut the phone lines, and overpowered the crew. Their own guy couldn't figure out the modern engine, so they forced the injured driver, Jack Mills, to move the train for them. From there, it was a sprint, a human chain throwing 2.5 tons of cash into a truck. They gave themselves just 15 minutes to get it all.
So, the gang gets away with what would be over £67 million today. Unbelievable. They'd actually pulled it off. But as they were driving off into the night, one of them said something. A single, tiny mistake that would bring the whole thing crashing down. That's what one of the robbers told the terrified postal workers they had tied up. Just a threat, right? Something to buy them a little more time to get away. What he didn't realize is that he'd just handed the police their very first and most important clue. And just like that, the investigation had a starting point. The police did the math right away. How far can you get in 30 minutes? That little off-the-cuff threat had just given them a search area, a 50-kilometer radius from the tracks. The net was already starting to tighten. Meanwhile, the gang makes it to their hideout, a remote little place called Leather Slade Farm. They're listening to the police on a radio, and when they hear about that search radius, well, panic starts to set in, and that panic led to their most legendary blunder. Their original plan was smart. Just lay low for a week and let the heat die down. But hearing the police were already closing in, they totally lost their nerve. They decide to bolt,
split the cash, and pay some guy to torch the farmhouse to get rid of the evidence. But guess what? The guy just took their money and ran, leaving the farmhouse and all the evidence inside perfectly intact.
So then a neighbor who'd noticed all the strange comings and goings calls the police. Investigators raid the farm and find mail bags, all sorts of stuff. The gang had tried to be careful. They'd wiped the whole place down for fingerprints. They thought they were in the clear. But they missed one little thing.
And this is the part of the story that's become famous. To kill time while they were hiding out, they played a game of Monopoly, using the actual stolen cash. And in their rush to get out of there, they forgot to wipe down the game board. Since most of these guys already had criminal records, their fingerprints were on file. And just like that, the game was up.
After the Monopoly board discovery, the arrests started happening pretty fast. But the story, it doesn't end there. The legacy of this robbery is messy. It's filled with long prison sentences, huge mysteries that are still unsolved, and some really tragic consequences. So let's look at the final numbers. An absolutely staggering amount of money was stolen. But in the end, most of the gang, 14 out of the 16 core guys, were caught. And they were hit with massive sentences, some up to 30 years. So a huge win for the police, but not a complete one.
Because two key people just disappeared into thin air. The guy they brought along to drive the train, never identified. And even more amazing, the Royal Mail insider, the guy who made the entire heist possible in the first place, was never caught. His identity is still one of the biggest mysteries in British crime history.
And it's really important to remember the human side of this. It's easy to get swept up in the drama of the heist, but the robbers' actions had a devastating impact. The train driver, Jack Mills, was beaten so badly with an iron bar that he never recovered from the trauma. He couldn't work again, and he died only 7 years later.
This whole event left such a huge mark on pop culture that the place itself has been renamed. That quiet little spot, Bridego Bridge, where they unloaded all that cash, today, pretty much everyone just calls it the Train Robbers Bridge. It's become a permanent monument to the crime.
So that brings us to the big question, right? They called it the crime of the century. The planning was genius, the execution was audacious, but the whole thing was unraveled by one careless comment and a board game. So when you weigh it all up, the brilliance, the tragic cost, the stupid mistakes, what do you think? Was this a masterclass in crime or just a really good cautionary tale?